Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be harvesting my beetroot and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with them right after this. My beetroot has been growing really well this year and I think we're going to have quite a nice harvest. So let's get out to the garden and pick us some beetroot. Beetroot is incredibly easy to grow and I recommend planting a few seeds if you have a spare patch of soil early next year, and this time next year you'll have yourself a lovely harvest. Follow along with my garden update series that I have every year and you'll see when I plant them if you are in the UK or even in the US, and you should be able to get yourself some lovely beetroot again by around September time next year. Now that we've destalked and cleaned our beetroot, it's time for us to process them. Obviously I have a lot of beetroot and I'm not going to be able to eat all of them in the next week, so I need to do something to preserve them. I'm going to use two different methods today that I'm going to show you, and the first one is fermenting them, which will obviously preserve them very well and also give a great flavor, a real nice tang to them. The other method I'm going to use is pickling, and the pickle method I'm going to use today is a spicy pickle. If you prefer it not so spicy or no spice at all, just remove the peppers and it'll still be a fantastic pickled beetroot recipe. First things first, we need to prepare the beetroot for the pickling. While the beetroot is cooking, we're going to prepare the vinegar. Now, of course, I'm making quite a large batch here, just adjust it according to your portion sizes. So just add this all into the pot. Be careful, these can be quite spicy, so if you are cutting them without gloves, just be aware you may regret it later. A little tip here, you can take these seeds out if you want, it will reduce the heat a little bit. Now the brown sugar is something that's down to preference. You can use all white sugar if you want, but I find the brown sugar really brings out a nice caramelized sort of flavor to your pickled beetroot. After boiling our beetroot for half an hour, we have let them cool sufficiently. We've emptied out the water and let them cool for about another 20 minutes, half an hour, so that we can actually handle them. Now, this process is a bit of fun. Unfortunately, beetroot can stain. It is obviously very dark colored, especially these purple ones. I'm going to wear gloves to do this next step because I don't want to have stained purple hands. So you can see there's some marks on some of these, which will also peel off. You might have noticed when I was picking them, these holes like this. I don't really worry too much about it. If you're a bit unhappy with blemishes on your food, then you feel free to do what you want to do. I'm not too fussed. These have been boiled quite well. These marks here are probably just snails or slugs that have been eating this, but after being cooked like this, I'm not worried about it at all. So we're just gonna keep doing that, get all this off, and you can see we have these beautiful beetroots underneath. So you can see I'm just peeling off the stalks as well. I don't want to have to cut them later, but you can cut them as well. You can see also the roots. I didn't cut them before. Don't waste time. Just peel them off when you do this part. I will, however, have to do a bit of trimming when we come to fermenting, because that's a little bit of a different process. He smells so good. There we have our cleaned up beetroot, and doesn't that just look amazing? I'm using another cutting board because I don't want it to stain my wooden cutting board, so just bear in mind these things really do stain. Well, it worked out almost perfectly there. I wish you could smell this, the aromas you get when you're cooking up a pickle vinegar. It just smells so good. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and fill these bottles up, and we're going to be a bit fair with what we add. So I want to put 1 bay leaf at least in each. And then of course we'll split out the peppers. This will mean if I do split this out half and half, that obviously the smaller jar is going to be a lot hotter in terms of spice than the bigger jar. But that's not a problem. My wife just won't eat that one. It's making my eyes water, the vinegar being heated up like this. I'm going to get this right up to the top, about 2 centimeters from the lip of the jar, especially if you are going to be canning this. Now I'm going to do a water bath canning of this, as well as this one over here. And I'm not showing you that process, not in this one. I will make a video in the future showing how to do canning, but I think it's out of the scope of what I'm doing here. These here are perfectly fine if you want to stick this in the fridge now, just let them cool down a bit. Obviously they're still quite hot, but if you stick them in the fridge after maybe a couple hours of sitting like this, then wait a week and you're going to have some beautiful pickled beetroot. If you are going to pressure can it or do a hot water bath canning, then obviously it's going to last a heck of a lot longer. So that really is up to you. Because I have so much vinegar left over, I decided I'm going to do a bit of a bonus pickling here. And that is using some of my lovely peppers. Over here we have some freshly picked Bishop's Crown, as well as some pepper dews. So not a very spicy pepper, but it'll still go great pickled. You really don't want peppers that are way too spicy when you're pickling them, because it's not going to be much fun eating those. So let's move these aside for now. The process here is fairly similar. What we're going to do is take these peppers, just destalk them. As you can see, nice and fresh, they're really firm. You don't want peppers that are turning or maybe beyond ripe, because they just, they could ruin your pickle. And what we're going to do here, just to help these pickle nicely, is take a skewer and just poke a hole through them. That one's cracked open anyway. You might be able to get one more in there. There we go. Before you put the lid on, just give it a bit of a wipe. And there you go. Just bear in mind, these are going to start soaking up some vinegar, so just give it a bit of time, let them soak it up for a bit, and then you're going to be topping this up with vinegar in a little while. Here are our beetroot, and we're going to have to cut these a little bit. When we cooked the last batch, I wasn't too concerned about things like that over there. I'm going to be cutting that out when it comes to doing it like this, because this is raw and it needs to be that way because this is a natural fermentation. The Lactobacillus, the things that actually do the fermentation, are on the skin here. And if you cook it, you're going to kill those Lactobacillus and you won't get a fermentation. So let's get processing with these. We're going to have to cut off the stem. Cut off a bit of that. The root. I'm just going to process the rest of them like that, just get them as clean as I can get them. I'll give them one last rinse at the end, and then we'll be ready to get this prepared for fermenting. So let's cut these up. We want, well, this is really up to you, how big you want it. I'm cutting it for what works for me. And we can see beautiful beetroot over there. I think that's the size I wanted. I want this to be a slow fermentation. So for the Lactobacillus to get inside there, get all the sugars out so that it can process it and ferment it. The bigger the piece, the longer it'll take. For these smaller ones, I'm going to put in whole. Let's try and pack this properly. Make the most of the space you have. The water we're going to use is plain water that's gone through a filter. You don't have to use bottled water or anything like that. You can, but just plain old filtered water is just perfectly fine. We're going to be making a 3% brine, which means we need 30 grams of salt for 1 liter of water. And make sure you're using pure sea salt or something like 100% salt, Himalayan rock salt, anything like that. Don't use normal table salt. It's not going to do a good job for the fermentation. That is so much easier than using a whisk or a fork. Just a reminder why we're adding brine to a fermentation. The salt inside here is going to help limit the growth of unwanted pathogens. So, you know, Lactobacillus luckily is something that can handle salty environments and actually thrives in it. Just not too salty, you don't want to go too high, but some of the other bad stuff that could grow in here won't grow in a salty environment. And then of course, this is going to create quite an acidic environment once the Lactobacillus starts processing the sugars in here, which releases lactic acid. And it's going to then make this quite safe because it's going to be acidic enough that a lot of things cannot live in it. So quite a neat process. That's a pretty color. So let's get these closed up and get the airlocks fitted. And make sure, as always, don't let the bottom of the airlock touch the liquid. So make sure you check underneath, because if it does, then all that's going to happen is the liquid itself is going to come up through the airlock, and that's not what you want. All we need to do is get some liquid into the airlocks and we are pretty much done. There you have it, 2 recipes to help you process your beetroot, to give you some beautiful, nutritious and tasty beetroot over the coming months. And what I would do with the pickled beetroot, if you haven't canned it, I would suggest putting it in the fridge, let it infuse and soak up that lovely goodness from the vinegar. And in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, try it out and see what you think. Otherwise, you know, if it's not to your taste just yet, let it go for another week or 2. If you have canned it, then obviously I'm sure you know exactly what you're doing, so you can stick that out on the shelf and eat it when you're ready. That's what I'm going to be doing. I will be trying some of this very soon because my mouth's watering already just thinking about it. With the fermented beetroot, what I would do is put that inside a dark place where you can maintain around about 20 degrees Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit and leave it there for at least 3 or 4 days. What that allows it to do is let the Lactobacillus, the good bacteria that's going to do the hard work here, it'll allow that to reproduce and it'll start doing its thing, start converting the sugars into lactic acid and CO2. The CO2 is what gets released, which is why you need to have an airlock or something like that to release that pressure. After the 3 or 4 days, I would recommend you got 2 options really. You can either leave it where it is, keep it fermenting, and it can ferment for weeks, months even, and it'll be perfectly safe. And you have the other choice, which is to take it after that 3 or 4 days, put it inside the fridge. It'll slow down that fermentation quite rapidly. And what that allows you to do is have a less acidic or less tangy beetroot. So it really is up to you. Personally, I think let it go for at least 3 or 4 weeks. Let it ferment in that location where you can maintain that 20 degrees Celsius or the 68 Fahrenheit. You'll just get a much tastier beetroot, and it's maybe an acquired taste, but it's such a good taste. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Until then, stay spicy.